Hey rich girls, Kirby here, and today we have our February book club episode. Okay, so for the month of February, we read The Psychology of Money. Now, if you follow my TikTok, you know that I got a late start on reading this book, and this is my book now. I did spill coffee all over one of the pages, so it's a good thing that it wasn't a library book. I think I probably said this in the last episode. I said that this book was on Spotify, that you could listen to it as an audiobook, and that if you already paid for Spotify Premium, that you could listen to this for free. Spotify decided to take it away from us. I don't know why, you couldn't even pay for it. There are some books on Spotify Premium that are not just available, that you do have to pay a little bit extra for. For whatever reason, this was on there. Added it to my book list in January. By mid-February, or probably the first week of February, it was gone. So sad. Now, I did go to my local library, put it on hold. Now, normally when I put a hold on a book at the library, unless it's something like Court of Thorns and Roses, usually I can get that book within a week or two. I was 47th in queue. So I ended up having to pay $10. I got it on Amazon, and I actually really enjoyed it. I love this book, so I am glad that I now own it. So I do apologize if any of you had tried to listen to the book on Spotify and couldn't get to it. I ran into the same issue. Also, since I do have a copy of this book, I am gonna force my husband to read this. He's not big into reading, and I normally don't push him to watch anything or listen to anything that I do, because I'm a little bit crazy with that kind of stuff. But I am gonna make him read this book because I got a lot out of it. And it's just a pretty easy read. It was a little over 200 pages. I think in total it's 238 pages. But it was a pretty quick read, and it was really interesting. It was not super dry. I know a lot of money and investing books can be a little bit dry and have a lot more technical information. This was pretty quick going, and it kept you interested. Okay, so one thing I did not know before reading this book, which I actually thought was pretty interesting, was that this was originally an article. I want to say it was in the Wall Street Journal, because Morgan Housel, the author, was previously a columnist in the Wall Street Journal and the Motley Fool. So I'm not sure which of those two he wrote the original article in, but I guess he had written a article that was called The Psychology of Money, and essentially he broke up this book into 19 chapters. And in the original article, he had 19 short stories exploring the strange ways people think about money. So in the book, he actually splits it up into 19 different chapters, and it's just a really cool way of splitting up the book to keep it interesting and to keep the reader engaged. But I did think that was interesting that it was based off of an article that he had written previously that became really popular. All right, so I wanted to highlight a few of the ideas and some of the pages that I read. All right, so first up, this was new information for me. This is something that I had never heard, and I would wager a bet that a lot of people did not know this, especially those in the financial industry. So essentially what he goes on to say, what Morgan said, and I'm going to be quoting the book right here: there is a widespread belief along the lines of everyone used to have a private pension, but this is wildly exaggerated. The Employee Benefit Research Institute explains only a quarter of those aged 65 or older had pension income in 1975. Among that lucky minority, only 15% of household income came from a pension, end quote. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation, and then I'm going to read that again for you. So basically, what a pension is, if you ever heard the word pension, it was essentially, instead of having to contribute to a 401k or for you to save money in order for you to retire at a certain age, workers previously would get what's called a pension. So kind of like Social Security, right? Where you work for a company for a certain amount of years, or you pay into a system, and then when you leave that system or you leave that company, they will continue to pay you. So basically it was kind of incentives for employees to stay with a certain employer and to stay in good standing, and to work hard, so that once they put in their 20, 30, 40 years, that they would then get paid out from a pension and be able to retire and be able to stop working. And honestly, I never really thought about it too much, like how many Americans were able to have a pension, but that's something that was kind of like drilled into us in the wealth management world, is that pensions are very rare nowadays. Like these days, it's very rare to see a pension. And so we would always explain that to people like, okay, well, back in the day, everyone had pensions. So you didn't have to put money into a 401k. You didn't have to necessarily, save money outside of your company giving you a pension. What I did not know, and so let me read it again, is that, quote, the Employee Benefit Research Institute explains that only a quarter of those aged 65 or older had pension income in 1975. So that's only 25% of workers. 25% of people age 65 or older had pension income in 1975. So that's not everyone. That's a very small amount of people. Among that lucky minority, only 15% of household income came from a pension. So only a quarter of those 65 and older in 1975 had pension income to begin with. And of those 25% of people, only 15% of their income came from a pension. That's not a lot of money. That's a very small amount. 15% is not a lot. That means that 85% of their income came from other sources. All right, the last thing, and then I'll stop on my bandwagon here. The last thing I wanted to note is that he says, quote, it was not until the 1980s that the idea that everyone deserves and should have a dignified retirement took hold. So that's kind of crazy to me. Basically, what that says to me is that pensions were not widespread. Obviously. I think we think about the fact now that like retiring, everybody deserves quote unquote to retire and to stop working at a certain point. That's like a pretty new development in history. Like if you think about it, unless you were super wealthy, like 100 years ago, like you just had to keep working until you literally died. Like unless you had money from family or from someone else passing away and like having money or owning property, like you had to keep working in order to have an income to feed your family. So I do think we kind of take that for granted now that like everybody wants to retire like as soon as they hit 65, like they think that they are entitled to retirement, even if they haven't necessarily saved for retirement. Which I've never really, like, you need to work hard to save money in order to retire. As Caleb Hammer so lovingly says, you don't want to keel over on the Walmart floor because you didn't save for retirement. And I do kind of agree with that. I know, not everyone's gonna love that, but I do think you need to get in the habit of saving money over time in order to stop working at some point. All right, I'll get off my tangent there. So that was the first like kind of thing of note that I noticed and that I really resonated with. Okay, so the second chapter is called Luck and Risk. And basically the author kind of goes into a lot of detail and kind of makes us think about how much we assume that our hard work plays into successes that we have in our life and how we downplay luck. One of my absolute favorite podcasts, How I Built This, at the end of every episode, the podcaster, he'll interview different business owners. Usually they're like very successful business owners that built like huge brands from the ground up. He'll ask them at the end of the episode, he'll say, so how much do you think your success is based off of luck and how much do you think is based off of hard work? And that's basically what this whole chapter is about. It's basically saying like, yes, you can do all of the right things, but unless you get lucky at certain points in your life, like your hard work can amount to basically nothing if you have bad luck. And vice versa. If somebody is making a bunch of terrible decisions, if they get lucky at the opportune time, they can become very successful, and it may look like from the outside that they're super smart when in fact they really just got super lucky. One thing I thought was really interesting, the author wrote a letter to his son. Some people are born into families that encourage education. Others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies encouraging of entrepreneurship. Others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful, and I want you to earn it. but realize that not all success is due to hard work, and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. I think that is so powerful, and I think that's a message that all of us can think about and consider a little bit. I think for me personally, like, I'd resonate with this a lot because I've been the past year or so, I've been really trying to ground myself in being grateful for everything. Literally, right now I'm sitting in a house, I have a candle that's burning, okay, and it smells good. I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful to be in a house, it's snowing outside, it's 12 degrees. I'm grateful to be in a house that has lights so that I can see, that is warm, that we have our heat on, that we can pay to have heat, that we live in a time where we have heat, that we live in a time where I can, at the end of the day, turn off the lights, go snuggle in a warm bed. There's a lot of little things that I feel like we all take for granted, and luck has a lot to do with that. I could have been born 50 years ago and not been able to open a credit card because I'm a woman. I could have been born 100 years ago, and I don't know when electricity was invented, but I could have been having to do this whole thing by oil lamp, and then there wouldn't even be a podcast because podcasts weren't a thing. You know what I mean? It's the little things like that where you just have to be so grateful for a lot of things. And but taking that into account with investing, wrapping it back into money, whenever you're looking to somebody else to either model your own finances or your financial decisions off of theirs, you have to take into account, or even their career, if you have career aspirations similar to somebody else, and you're kind of looking at them as a mentor, maybe they're further along than you have to take into consideration, even if you do every single thing the exact same way, the circumstances are going to be different. There's going to be, a certain amount of luck on their side, a certain amount of luck on your side. You cannot just always assume that if you do things the exact perfect way that you're going to get the perfect outcome, right? You never know. You never know what's going to happen. I could be right now creating an amazing video that could have the potential to get hundreds of thousands of views, but then maybe I have a stroke of bad luck and my memory card completely fails. I really hope I'm not putting this into existence right now by speaking it. But if my memory card fails, that's bad luck. I had nothing to do with it. It's no poor planning on my part. But then this video never gets out. I never get hundreds of thousands of views. There's just so many moving pieces that go into every single thing that happens in this world. And so you have to take all that into consideration, especially when making investment decisions. I feel like that's just good life advice too. Everything comes back to money in here, but I feel like the big takeaways I took away were more life advice. Okay, so this next part I absolutely love. And this is part of chapter 9 that is called Wealth is What You Don't See. So I'm going to read you an excerpt first. Diet and exercise offer a useful analogy. Losing weight is notoriously hard, even among those putting in the work of vigorous exercise. In his book, The Body, Bill Bryson explains why. One study in America found that people overestimate the number of calories they burned in a workout by a factor of 4. They also then consumed, on average, about twice as many calories as they had just burned off. The fact is, you can quickly undo a lot of exercise by eating a lot of food, and most of us do. Exercise is like being rich. You think, I did the work, and I now deserve to treat myself to a big meal. Wealth is turning down that treat meal and actually burning net calories. It's hard and requires self-control. But it creates a gap between what you could do and what you choose to do that accrues to you over time. The problem for many of us is that it is easy to find rich role models. It's harder to find wealthy ones because by definition, their success is more hidden. So one of the things that the author really goes into depth in this chapter about is the fact that a lot of people that you see on the outside as being quote unquote rich, the people that drive the really fancy cars and the people that have the really big houses and the fancy watch and the designer purses, those people are spending a lot of their income. And obviously a lot of people use them as role models and try to kind of copy how they make money, and then by default also how they spend money. He also kind of goes into the ego and how ego has a lot to do with a lot of the things that we buy to kind of be flashy and show other people that we have money. On the flip side, those that are wealthy, those that accumulate a lot of wealth over their lifetime, don't tend to spend a lot of money. So that's kind of like your neighbor next door that's a millionaire but wears, regular jeans and New Balance sneakers. So those kinds of people that don't succumb to lifestyle creep, right? That they live within their means, they are able to increase their income over time or just have normal income, but they're spending less than they make, right? So those wealthier people that are actually accumulating generational wealth, you're not going to see them flashing the fancy car. You're not going to see them buying, as much, the biggest possible house that they can with a huge mortgage attached to it, right? Whereas the people who tend to flaunt their wealth, quote unquote, tend to spend a lot of their wealth. And so he kind of goes into like the difference between being rich and making a lot of money and being wealthy. You're saving it and investing it and letting it run for long term. Now, I saw this a lot in wealth management. The people who make a lot of money and the people who can earn high incomes are not the same people who know how to accumulate wealth and grow wealth and become wealthy people. This is like anytime that you see a celebrity or a famous person or like an athlete or a lottery winner who made a lot of money either in a short amount of time or over their lifetimes, but then declare bankruptcy at some point, like that just goes to show that just because you made a lot of money at one point and you are quote unquote rich does not mean that you can keep that wealth and build it and make it into something bigger. So I think that was definitely like an interesting kind of like sentiment to read about. That whole chapter was really interesting. And he kind of dove more into like choosing better role models, or even kind of like, in my mind, it's like being a better role model for yourself. One of the things he talked about is like if you see someone walking by and they have like the designer purse and the designer shoes, you're not necessarily admiring that person. In your mind, you're more so thinking, oh, how cool would it be if I had that purse? How cool would it be if I had that car? How cool would I look to other people if I had X, Y, and Z? So you're still thinking about all these things in terms of yourself, even though that person probably bought all those things for other people to look at and be like, oh, look, that person's so cool. Not so much. You're always going to frame it in terms of yourself. I also just wanted to go over really quick. There's these two couples that we had as clients back when I was in wealth management, and I'm not going to give any like personal details away, but these were real couples, and I just thought they were the perfect example of this. So we had one couple who made not a ton of money, just like average income. I think by the end of their working careers, collectively, they were making about $100,000. So that's like both of them making, a $50K salary, which is not a ton of money, especially by the end of your working career. They lived within their means. They did not have lifestyle creep. They did not have debt, okay? They did not go into like credit card debt. They didn't have like car loans. They did have a mortgage, but it was something that they could afford with their income. And they had saved, I think, about 10 to 15% of their income every single year, put it into their retirement accounts. And so by the time they retired, they had over $1 million in retirement, and they, just based on their financial plan, were completely set. On the flip side, we had a different couple who came in. They made a lot of money. They had made a lot of money their entire lives. One of the spouses had a very high income job, and essentially his company was forcing him to retire. And between the two of them and between their, they had different investment properties. So between all the income, they made about $1 million a year. So they had extremely, extremely high income. They had tenfold income of the first couple. So couple one made $100,000 collectively. were retiring with over $1 million, and they were going to be fine financially, just taking into consideration their expenses and their lifestyle. They were completely set. Couple number 2 came in making $1 million a year. And believe me when I say they spent that money like they meant it. So even though they made $1 million every year, by the time they retired, they only had $4 million saved for retirement. Now, I know looking from the outside, if someone has 1 million and someone has 4 million, you're going to think that person with 4 million is better off financially, right? Well, not if they had been making $1 million a year and essentially spending that income every single year and getting used to the fact of having lifestyle creep for decades. So this couple was coming in, they really had no other option but to retire since this spouse was being forced to retire. And essentially they were either going to have to liquidate investment properties, they were going to have to significantly cut back on their monthly, lifestyle expenses. They would pay for a lot of things. And if they kept spending like that, they were going to run out of money within a very short period of time. And I think they were just the perfect example, and it was such a good kind of wake up call for me that just because you make a lot of money does not mean that you know how to spend it and you know how to save it. And just because you don't make a lot of money does not mean that you're not going to set yourself up for financial success over your working career by saving every single year and living within your means. Ooh, okay, so this chapter, moving on. So this is chapter 16, and it's called You and Me. Beware taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you are. This was super interesting to me. I absolutely love this chapter, chapter 16. Go back and reread it if you kind of skimmed over it. Let me read you a little excerpt and then I'll kind of explain a little bit what I mean. Being swayed by people playing a different game can also throw off how you think you're supposed to spend your money. So much consumer spending, particularly in developed countries, is socially driven, subtly influenced by people you admire, and done because you subtly want people to admire you. But while we can see how much money other people spend on cars, homes, clothes, and vacations, we don't get to see their goals, worries, and aspirations. A young lawyer aiming to be a partner at a prestigious law firm might need to maintain an appearance that I, a writer who can work in sweatpants, have no need for. But when his purchases set my own expectations, I'm wandering down a path of potential disappointment because I'm spending the money without the career boost he's getting. We might not even have different styles. We're just playing a different game. It took me years to figure this out. A takeaway here is that few things matter more with money than understanding your own time horizon and not being persuaded by the actions and behaviors of people playing different games than you are. So essentially what he was talking about a lot in this chapter is the fact that different people are going to have different investment goals, right? So for me personally, I just turned 30 this year. I'm going to be 31 in a few short months. And I still have a pretty long time horizon until I need to touch any of my investment funds, right? Pretty much all of our investments are being saved for retirement. And so I'm not thinking about the short term. I really don't care what the stock market's doing today. I'm not playing the penny stock game. I'm investing for myself 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now. So my time horizon and the way that I look at investments and the money that I'm going, the stocks and the funds that I'm going to pick are very different from someone who's 55 and is looking to retire within the next 10 years, right? And that also might look different if somebody, I'm planning on working or making an income until I'm 65, right? If somebody wants to grind in their 20s and 30s so that they can save and retire by the time they're 50, then someone who's my age, someone in their 30s, an early 30-year-old, their investments are also going to look a lot different than mine because they're going to need to be more aggressive, they're going to need to be saving a lot more, and they're going to need to be a lot more frugal about living below their means. Basically, what he's getting at is don't compare yourself to other people. Focus on your goals. Know what your goals are, right? That's kind of what I've been going back to, like this past year and a half has been really, for me personally, has been focused on getting really clear in my goals for the future, for the short-term goals, and how I can like achieve those goals. And a lot of that has to do with finances, right? Money has to do with everything. It has to do, like, pretty much any goal that you're gonna have is gonna in some way be related to money. Basically, I just want to encourage you to like figure out what your investment goals are. Like, what are your life goals? What kind of investment goals do you need to set in order to achieve those life goals? And then what are the steps you need to take in investing in order to reach those investment goals? Does that kind of make sense? So like, if you're 30 and you want to retire by the time you're 50, that means you're going to have to save more money. That means you're going to have to be more aggressive in your investments in order to reap that return. And that means you're going to have to live well below your means. And you're going to have a pretty strict handle on your budget, right? So you kind of have to keep all of those things in mind and then kind of keep your head down and put your blinders on, because you don't want to compare yourself to me, because I'm going to be saving a little bit less. I'm going to be spending a little bit more, but you shouldn't be comparing yourself to me because I'm planning on working longer. All right, hopefully that made sense. Okay, one of the biggest things that I'm taking away, and I don't remember what chapter they went over this in, the idea that you can have a general savings account that does not serve a particular purpose. I think a lot of us kind of type A, even like ADHD people who have a lot of ideas and we like to write everything down. Obviously, I'm big on writing all my things down, writing my goals down, having very, very, very specific goals. Sometimes having a not specific goal can be just as advantageous. Let me explain. So basically what the author's going over in one of the chapters, I think he said this pretty early on in the book, was basically having general savings that has no specific goal is important to have. And that really hit home because I don't have that. One thing I wanted to kind of go over with you guys, and if you've listened to some of my like budgeting episodes, then you know that I use Ally Bank as my high yield savings account. And one of the things that I love about them is they have what are called buckets. And basically what these buckets is within your savings account, you can separate out your money into specific goals. So I'm going to log in and I'm just going to tell you exactly how I separate this out. And I do love this and I'm going to continue to utilize it. But essentially I have savings buckets. So right now I have an emergency fund. I have a dollar goal amount that I want to have, and I have a target date that I want to reach that goal. Same for tax payments. Because we have some business stuff, I set aside a certain money for taxes every single month. So again, I have a target amount for that, and I have a target date that I want to hit that amount. Special occasions, so like Christmas presents, birthday presents, we have a dollar amount and a date every year that we want to be able to fund that. We have a 10-year anniversary trip that we want to fund, a new home down payment that we want to fund, a New Zealand, Australia trip that we want to fund years and years down the road, literally like 10 years down the road. And then also education for my kids. So basically all of our savings are very, very accounted for, if that makes sense. We have very specific goals, we have very specific dates, and we have a specific amount that we put aside every month into those different buckets. What I don't have is general savings. Because in my mind, again, as a goal-oriented person, I want all of my money to be working for me. I want all of my money to be set aside for very specific purposes. And in my mind, our emergency fund was kind of like our catch-all account, where if we had an emergency, if something popped up, then we can just pull out of the emergency fund. As long as we have 6 months worth of expenses in there, then we're good to go. But kind of what the book made me think about is like, what if something happens that you can't even think about right now? Like basically he goes into a whole section on you can't expect the unexpected, because the unexpected you can't think of it. The unexpected is not something that you're going to plan for. And he goes into a lot of examples on this, and I just thought it was like fascinating because it's so true. Like, I can think of emergencies, I can think of things that have happened, in the past, I can think of things that have happened to other people. But unexpected things, unprecedented things happen literally all the time. They happen every day. We might not see them every day, but they happen everywhere in the world every day. So you kind of have to expect that the unexpected, you have to plan that unplanned things are going to happen, but you're not going to know what they are. And it might not be an emergency. It could be, I have an opportunity to go see, I don't know, Taylor Swift. My girls love Taylor Swift. It could be, and that's not an emergency, right? That's not something that I'm like necessarily saving for. It could also be that, I'm trying to think of something that isn't an emergency, but it's hard to think of unplanned things and unexpected things, right? Because by nature, they're unexpected. You're not planning for them. But let's say like an investment property pops up. Let's say, the housing market goes down and a bunch of dream homes that we would love to be able to purchase suddenly pop up on the market because people can't afford their mortgage payments because people weren't planning for the unexpected. They weren't planning for the unplanned. Well, what if we don't have cash set aside to go and like snatch up a property with cash? But what if we did? What if I have a general savings account and we actually had savings to play with that didn't serve a specific purpose? We don't want to have to pull from our retirement fund. We don't want to have to pull from our emergency fund. What if we just have general savings that we might not ever touch? That might also be the case. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe nothing unexpected or unplanned, which sounds crazy because it is. Maybe nothing like that ever pops up and we don't need to use it. And then we just have an extra savings bucket available to us that helps us sleep a little bit better at night. So I'm definitely going to be starting a general savings account. That's, I think, going to be a bucket. And I think that's going to be something that we don't even have like a set dollar amount for. I think that's something that maybe every month we put aside a certain amount of money and we just keep doing that indefinitely. And anytime we want to throw some extra money in there, we do. And if we use it, great. If not, great. It's still there. I would highly recommend everyone in your household read this book. So if you are married, I would definitely suggest having your spouse read this book. If you are a mom and you have like teenage kids, this is a great book to have like teenagers or college students read, because the earlier that you start kind of like wrapping your head around these ideas and like putting these little like seeds, little nuggets of knowledge in your head, the better, because the earlier you start saving, which is a whole nother section in here, that I'm not going to touch on right now. But basically letting your investments compound is so valuable, and people underestimate how valuable time horizons can be. All right, so next month we are going to be reading for March. Our book of the month is going to be Atomic Habits. Now, I know I said the rest of our books are going to be all about money. So sorry, I lied. I'm kind of switching some stuff around a little bit. The book after that is going to be about investing, and I didn't want to hop right into that after this book, so we are going to read Atomic Habits. You've heard me talk about habit stacking a lot. If you haven't read Atomic Habits, you are going to effing love this book. It's so good. And I will put links to where you can buy it, where you can get it for free. I promise it's at your local library. I cannot promise that you won't be 47th in queue to get it. I do believe that it's on Spotify Premium. Let me double check that right now. Okay, as of right now, today, which is February 19th, 7:25 p.m., Atomic Habits is included in Spotify Premium, okay? So hopefully that remains the case. And if you have already read this book, I would definitely suggest reading it again. I've read it once. I think I read it last year for the first time, like early last year. And I enjoyed it so much. It's similar to The Power of Habit, which we read in January, but there's a lot of different ideas. And it really goes into habit stacking, which is just like mind blowing. I love it. I love it so much. And it'll give you a lot of ideas as to how you can like streamline different things. And again, just thinking about habits and thinking about your money in like habitual ways. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands right now. I really want to get you guys into like daily routines, like thinking about your routines, thinking about how you can like streamline processes, because that, like, the more that you can streamline your day, the more that you can think about your habits, the more you're going to be able to change things within your finances. It's as simple as that. All right, I would love to know what you guys thought about this book, The Psychology of Money, in the comments below. Please let me know what you thought. I absolutely loved it. I thought there were so many good nuggets. Like I said, I'm going to make my husband read it. I'm probably going to read it again, and I'm probably going to make my kids read it. I have a whole list of things that I want them to read once they get into like high school, and this is definitely going to be on there. And I think also just the way that it's broken out into the different chapters, it's very readable, easy to read, easy to digest. Be sure to get the next book, Atomic Habits, and I cannot wait for our next book club at the end of March. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for participating. I absolutely love this. I think it's going to be a great year of books so far, 2 for 2, and I know you guys are going to love this next one. So thank you so much. Bye.